I think that most people would agree that they had a motive, yes.
They had a motive to kill their daughter's pimp.
Most parents will tell you that they would do everything to protect their kids. But what happens inside a parent's mind when they find their kid being brutalized by someone?
Uno fue recapturado, pero uno aún sigue libre. A raíz de eso, yo también pedí seguridad en lo que este reo fuera.
Miriam Rodriguez. The case of Miriam Rodriguez is a pretty wild one, and probably one of the craziest stories you'll ever hear. It began in Tamaulipas, Mexico, where a group of men armed with AK-47 rifles came across a young woman on the road. The woman tried to run away, but the men grabbed her and lifted her into their truck before speeding off. Now, this was not a rare occurrence in Mexico, as there were a lot of stories of many people going missing after getting kidnapped by cartels. But this is where this case takes a completely unexpected turn. The young woman was Miriam Rodriguez's 20-year-old daughter, Karen, and on March 23, 2014, she received a call from an unknown number telling her that her daughter had been taken, and she needed to give a $2,000 ransom to get her back. Before the call ended, she heard someone on the other end call out for a person named Sama, and then the line disconnected. Miriam and her husband were desperate to get their daughter back, so they gathered the ransom money and followed the instructions they were given. They paid the initial ransom, expecting their daughter to be released at a local cemetery. But days and weeks went by, and they never saw their daughter again. Miriam started getting more calls, asking for extra money, and she started losing hope. Even with all the uncertainty, Miriam believed that justice needed to be done. Miriam's hope of ever seeing her daughter died when a friend suggested that Karen might not come back and could be already gone. Later, it turned out to be true. Karen was killed shortly after being kidnapped. Miriam was angry, sad, and full of resentment, and she promised to take matters into her own hands. She focused on finding the person behind the nickname Sama and used her daughter's Facebook profile to gather information. Miriam had a plan to locate the criminals responsible and make sure they paid for what they did. Miriam found a photo tagged with the name Sama on her daughter's social media. She quickly figured out who the guy was and tracked him to an ice cream shop 2 hours from San Fernando. The picture was of a girl working at the parlor, giving Miriam her first lead. She started going to the ice cream shop regularly, keeping an eye on the girl's schedule, hoping to see Sama. Luckily, the couple showed up one day. Miriam quietly followed them to a house, feeling nervous but hopeful. The police needed solid proof, like Sama's real name, to step in. So, Miriam changed her appearance, dyeing her hair red and dressing up like someone from the Ministry of Health. She even had a fake ID. She pretended to be doing housing surveys to get info about Sama, with pictures, addresses, and phone numbers. Miriam sought help from the authorities. It was tough. Many turned her down until one kind officer decided to assist. They got an arrest warrant, but Sama had vanished. Still, Miriam kept going, using whatever resources she had. Her big break came on Mexico's Independence Day, when Sama unexpectedly visited Miriam's family clothing business in Cad, Victoria. Her son, Luis, spotted him browsing their stuff. They called the police, and he got caught. During questioning, Sama spilled the beans on others involved in Karen's death. Miriam didn't stop. She caught 10 of her daughter's killers who had left the cartel. She became well known in San Fernando, but it got risky. Fearing retaliation from the cartel, she got government-assigned bodyguards. Sadly, on Mother's Day, she was shot and killed outside her house. Miriam's efforts made her a symbol of activism, but her family paid a high price for it. LM1. On April 18, 2008, in Culiacan, Sinaloa, Mexico, assassins from a Mexican cartel ambushed and killed 20-year-old Anastasio Torres Acosta. He was the son of the well-known Sinaloa cartel drug lord, LM1. Devastated by his son's death, LM1's sole purpose became seeking revenge. Born on February 28, 1958, in Cosala, Sinaloa, Mexico, LM1 had family connections with Javier Torres Felix, also known as LJT. LJT had a close friendship and partnership with Ismael Zambada, a significant figure in the Sinaloa cartel's hierarchy. It is clear that LM1 grew up desensitized and surrounded by firearms and narcotics. As he grew older during the 1990s, he joined the ranks of the Sinaloa cartel. However, his true test came in 2004 when his brother, Javier, was arrested by Mexican authorities. With Javier gone, LM1 took on the crucial role of overseeing the transportation of cocaine from South America into the Mexican states of Chiapas and Oaxaca. This role was extremely important, boosting his status within the cartel. He even closely collaborated with El Chapo's son, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, strengthening strengthening his position in the cartel. However, this fame also made him a major target for the Sinaloa cartel's main rivals, the Beltran Leyva organization, also known as BLO. These enemies aimed to turn LM1 from a typical drug dealer into a ruthless killing machine. And how did they achieve this? Through emotional torment by killing his son during the BLO versus Sinaloa drug war on April 18, 2018. The incident unfolded near the Montebello residential district of Culiacan, right outside the health ministry. LM1's 20-year-old son, Torres Acosta, found himself in a terrifying situation when a group of sicarios, or hitmen, working for the Beltran Leyva cartel launched a surprise attack. Torres wasn't alone. He was with his sister, Alondra, and LM1's sister-in-law, Rivas Heredia. The hitmen tried to kidnap Torres Acosta, but he fought back, leading them to open fire and kill him on the spot. The shots wounded his sister in her right arm and shoulder, and LM1's sister-in-law in her left leg. After the killing, the police found the getaway car used by the hitmen, and inside was something that deeply angered LM1. On behalf of your friend and his nephews, Los Zetas, so you can understand, Manuel Torres, in the days following his son's tragic death, LM1 took a dark turn. He ordered his followers to capture members of the Beltran Leyva cartel and Los Zetas, subjecting them to unimaginable torture at his ranch. During this time, LM1's psychosis became evident as he brutally tormented and cold-bloodedly executed each prisoner. One victim was the municipal police commander Roberto Carlos Barcelo Villagran, and he suffered a gruesome ordeal. His remains were then put in the trunk of a car and then scattered throughout Culiacan. Despite the initial violence, the cycle of revenge and bloodshed continued, intensifying LM1's emotional instability. His ruthless method earned him the nickname El Ondeado, which signified his descent into madness. He claimed the lives of over 30 Beltran Leyva cartel hitmen and ordered the deaths of hundreds more, turning Culiacan into a nightmare with blood-soaked streets and lifeless bodies. In response, the Mexican government deployed 2,000 troops to quell the violence, leading to LM1's eventual downfall. In September 2008, authorities raided one of his safe houses, uncovering firearms, narcotics, and incriminating photographs. By 2011, he was on the U.S. government's blacklist under the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act. Despite the threat, LM1 remained indifferent, not caring about the consequences. On October 13, 2012, in Culiacan, LM1 was in a group of cars with his bodyguards when Mexican federal forces stopped him on the road. He attempted to escape, but he was shot and killed. He was buried beside his son Anastasio in a cemetery outside of Culiacan. Gary Plausch. This parent could not bear the thought that someone he had trusted with his son had done something despicable to him, so he took the law into his hands and delivered his own form of justice. Gary Plausch is a native of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and he was separated from his wife June at the time of the incident. Between 1983 and 1984, Gary's son, Jody, was taking karate lessons with a 25-year-old instructor named Jeffrey Doucet. But what Gary didn't know at the time was that this evil man was actually doing perverted and inappropriate things to his son for at least a year. Jody started making excuses to miss his karate classes, but his parents, not suspecting anything was wrong, thought that Jody was just being lazy and kept on pushing him to go to these classes. However, things took a crazy turn when the pedo instructor decided to kidnap Jody. He took the boy to a motel in California where he did indecent and disgusting things to him for 10 straight days. The case gained nationwide attention, with the police and FBI trying all they could to locate Jeffrey and bring Jody back to his parents. At some point, Jeffrey allowed Jody to speak to his mom and let her know that he was still alive. The cops used that call to pin the location of the motel, and within a week, Jeffrey was arrested and Jody rescued. But this was just the beginning of the story. News reports were saying graphic things about what Jeffrey did to Jody, and this really angered Gary to the point that he decided to deliver his own form of justice. On March 16, 1984, Jeffrey was flown back to Louisiana to face trial. He arrived at the Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport and was led in handcuffs by police officers through that airport. What no one knew at the time was Gary was waiting patiently outside the airport with a revolver in hand. You can see him there with the new crew, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, trying to conceal his identity. He waited until Jeffrey was just a short distance away from him, and before anyone knew what was happening, he pulled out his gun and fired at Jeffrey's head. As Jeffrey fell down from the bullet wound close to his right ear, the police pounced on Gary and restrained him before removing that gun from his hand. The incident was captured on videotape, and you could hear one one of the officers who recognized Gary, expressing his disappointment that Gary let his anger get the better of him. Jeffrey ended up dying from the bullet wound, and Gary was given a 7-year suspended sentence with 5 years probation and 300 hours of community service, which he completed in 1989. Sadly, he passed away in 2014 after suffering a stroke 3 weeks before his 69th birthday. While there are many who believed that what Gary did was wrong, others supported his actions and called him a hero. But what do you think? Eduardo Gallo. Just like Miriam, this next father went far and beyond to seek justice and bring down his daughter's killers. In July 2000, 25-year-old Paula Gallo was hanging out with her friends at her parents' weekend home when several attackers jumped over the fence and began terrorizing them. For 2 hours, the criminals ransacked the home, stealing clothes and jewelry before taking off with Paula and 2 of the family's cars. So, the kidnappers picked this area because it's a fancy spot for rich folks in Mexico. During that time, 7 more kidnappings happened and no one got caught. Then, Paula's dad, Eduardo, got a call asking for a crazy amount of $118,500, like 3 million Mexican pesos. It was way too much, but the kidnappers probably knew the Gallo family had some money, so they tried to squeeze out even more. Eduardo quickly paid up, but after that, there was no word from the kidnappers, and he didn't see his daughter again. Sadly, Eduardo's daughter's body was found a week later, near where he dropped the ransom. But what's really messed up is that a big part of the money was found right next to her, untouched. She had 2 bullet wounds in the neck and the back, which is just heartbreaking. So, after Eduardo reported his daughter's case to the police, they arrested 3 people, but none of them were the actual killers. Weirdly, the cops didn't seem too interested in digging deeper. Eduardo got suspicious when they found one of his stolen cars, but refused to check for evidence because it rained that day. A pretty lame excuse, right? Things got even crazier when his daughter's body was found. Suddenly, her outfit disappeared, and the cops lied about finding any fingerprints where she was taken. Eduardo knew something was off, and he felt like no one would find his daughter's killers unless he did something about it. He closed down his business and became like a detective, trying to work with the police, but they had already closed the case. Eduardo didn't give up though. Using his connections, he got secret info on the call logs, locations, and houses of the 3 guys arrested for his daughter's murder. Bam! He got a lead. Eduardo found a number from a random payphone near the area that kept trying to contact one of the suspects. He traced it to a town named Tultitlan in the state of Mexico. When Eduardo showed the evidence to the police, they were surprised, but had to go along with his info. They found a 28-year-old guy named Francisco Zamora Arano, and he eventually admitted to killing Paula. Here's the thing. It took Eduardo, a determined dad, a whole year to crack the murder case that the Mexican police thought was already solved. In an interview, he said it's a shame he, a newbie in crime solving, had to do the investigation. The state attorney general's office didn't really do much besides checking if his discoveries were valid. Barry Laprelle Gilton and Lupe Mercado. What would you do if you saw your own daughter being used and mistreated by an evil man and no one was willing to help? These next parents found themselves in that situation and decided to turn into vigilantes to rescue their beloved daughter from the paws of a vile predator. Barry and Lupe started dating back in high school, and although they never officially got married, they lived together and had 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. The girl's name has been kept secret to protect her identity. When the girl was 17 years old, Lupe started to notice her daughter's behavior changing. She was staying out late and locking herself in her room and didn't want to talk to anyone. This forced her parents to start snooping around and see if they could figure out what was going on. And when they checked her computer, their world came crashing down when they discovered that their 17-year-old girl was selling herself on social media and online platforms. When the young girl came home that night, her parents confronted her about it and decided to send her to her uncle's place in LA, hoping that she would change. But this made things worse, because while in LA, she met a 22-year-old gang member named Calvin Sneed. Sneed manipulated the young girl into becoming a street escort and took almost all the money she was making. Her uncle reported the matter to her parents, who in turn reported it to the police. But the police weren't eager to get on this case because, according to them, there wasn't a lot of evidence available to arrest Sneed. The parents didn't give up. They reported the girl missing to several missing and exploited children, registries and services, hoping that they would do something to to help, but again, it was to no avail. At this point, Sneed had become her pimp, and no matter how much they tried getting her away from him, she would always go back. Desperate to get their underage daughter away from this predator, the parents had no other option but to take the matter into their own hands. Their first thought was to kill Sneed. And on May 27, 2012, Barry and Lupe stationed themselves along Gland Avenue in North Hollywood, waiting for Sneed to pass by. They knew this was his usual route while trafficking their daughter. They had brought a gun with them and were prepared to pull the trigger if that was what it took to save their child. So, when Sneed showed up at the location, Barry took out the 9mm and fired several times at him. But while Sneed was injured, most of the bullets missed him and he escaped with his life. At the time, Sneed had no idea that the people who had fired at him were the girl's parents, because if he did, he probably wouldn't have done what he did next. On June 2, 2012, Sneed and the 17-year-old returned to San Francisco to visit a sick family member. Since her parents' house wasn't that far away, the girl went to see them and told them that she was around, but would be staying with Sneed and his family. That was what Barry and Lupe needed to make another move on Sneed. On June 4, 2012, Sneed had gone to pick up the girl from her parents' home. At around 2 a.m., a silver SUV drove by, and someone inside fired multiple times at Sneed, killing him instantly. The girl saw everything and knew immediately that her parents were involved. She called the cops on the couple, and they were arrested and charged with murder. However, they were both later acquitted of murder, but Barry was accused of being a member of a criminal gang and charged with racketeering conspiracy, but he was acquitted of that as well and released after being in jail for 8 years. Lupe, on the other hand, served 7 years for being an accessory after the fact. What would you have done in these parents' position? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button.